Hi, I'm Jeff from New York. Please like and subscribe.
Episode 53, The Grandfather.
I'm relieved that you finally recognize me.
Jeff patted Matthew's shoulder. Matthew took off his sunglasses, looked Jeff up and down, and shouted excitedly,
"Big brother, is it really you?"
After hugging Jeff for a long time, he finally stepped back. The beautiful young women were watching everything. One of them stammered to her friend,
I heard something a moment ago. Did you hear what Matthew just called that loser? Did you hear him say big brother? Did you hear that?
She turned to look at the others and saw that they were as shocked as she was. They had been waiting to have a good laugh at Jeff's expense, but now they felt uneasy.
That bastard was Matthew's brother.
They didn't dare to think about what they had just done. The thought of it was too alarming.
So Jeff, I understand you were leering at my girlfriend and even touched her chest. So that's the sort of person you are, is it? Hee hee. Do you fall for her? Let me tell you, she's a real goer. If you like her, I'll give her to you. If not, I'll find you someone else.
Matthew said with a wicked smile.
Haha, get out of here.
Jeff smiled. Matthew had always been a joker when he was young. He had not seen his brother for a few years, and he couldn't believe how much he had grown up. As the two of them chatted about their childhoods, they walked over to Michelle and the others. Michelle lowered her head and said timidly,
"I'm sorry, Mr. Florento. I was blind. I didn't mean to offend you."
I'm sorry too, Mr. Florento.
Another girl said.
We were wrong.
A few of them cried out in unison.
"We're so sorry."
All 10 girls apologized to Jeff. At this moment, Matthew remembered all the bad things that the girls had said about Jeff. He pointed at the group and said sternly,
"You bunch of blind idiots. Just now you accused my brother of ogling you and even touching you. Do you know who Jeff is? Do you really think he needs to sneak around, lure at you and touch you?"
Jeff relaxed as he watched his brother defend him.
Even if Jeff couldn't resist touching any of you, you should feel grateful and be thinking about how to please him.
Jeff stopped his brother.
What did Matthew just say? What did he mean by, even if he can't resist? It's natural for a man to want beautiful women, and I'm the same as any other man, but I can certainly control myself. My will is strong.
When Matthew became angry, the girls shuddered and kneeled in the sand, looking beseechingly at him.
Matthew, we were wrong. Please forgive us this once.
They cried.
Jeff, we should punish them. Let's get them to run around the island until they're too tired to walk.
Matthew suggested. Jeff looked at the group of girls and said with a smile,
Nah, no need. These women are all your girlfriends, and they're beautiful. They were just a little rude.
The girls were thinking.
The older brother Jeff seems to know how to be compassionate. He said that we're beautiful.
This man is a gentleman after all.
But how can he control himself when he sees us in our bikinis?
Hoping to attract Jeff, now all the girls stuck out their chests and pouted. Jeff addressed the girls.
You're all familiar with the items on a bed, right?
Jeff asked them.
The items on a bed?
They thought.
What's he referring to? He can't just be talking about sex because he emphasized the word items. Is he talking about candles or even whips? Okay, Jeff knows how to spice things up.
One of the girls said.
Mr. Florento, I understand. I'm very experienced and I'll do anything for you in bed.
Me too. I've been in all sorts of beds. No one knows a better bed than me.
Another added. Another girl said.
I'll keep you warm in bed, and I guarantee you'll never want to leave.
When they said these things to Jeff, they bit their lips in an alluring manner and winked at him. They each believed that if they could seduce him, they would be comfortable for the rest of their lives.
Excellent.
Jeff nodded with satisfaction and looked at Matthew. He asked him,
Do you remember the accommodation area for workers on our island?
Matthew replied,
Yes, I know it. There are more than 1,000 workers and servants on the island. They lived in the same accommodation area for decades. Their children lived there too.
Okay.
Jeff nodded and looked at the girls.
You guys go there right now. Take the bed sheets off their beds and wash them yourselves. And there are probably 70 or 80 children there who are under 2 years old who need feeding.
What?
The girls were horrified.
This man doesn't want to go to bed with us. but he wants us to go and wash the bedsheets for the workers and to breastfeed the workers' children.
They thought. They couldn't help but look at their voluptuous bodies, and they felt desperate.
Our luscious breasts aren't here for breastfeeding. Are you interested at all in our gorgeous bodies? Even if you're not interested, we shouldn't have to ruin our wonderful figures by breastfeeding.
Matthew saw their reluctance and questioned them.
What? Have you got any objections to what Jeff just told you to do?
Of course the girls had objections, but they didn't dare to voice them out loud. One by one, they shook their heads at Matthew with awkward smiles, stood up and walked away with reluctant hearts.
Awesome.
Matthew gave Jeff a big thumbs up.
Only my big brother could come up with such a fabulous idea. It's good to get them actually doing some work.
How did you become so full of yourself? All right, our family didn't make you go through the poverty test like me.
Since Jeff had left the family 7 years ago to take the poverty test, he had received no news or updates about his family members.
I'm not Jeff. I've got no desire to be the head of the family. In fact, when you become the boss in the future, you'll have to take care of me.
Matthew said to Jeff with a cheeky smile. Jeff sighed. His little brother hadn't changed at all. He only ever thought about himself.
Hey bro. I heard from Uncle Frank that you brought your girlfriend here. Why don't you take me to see my future sister-in-law?
Matthew said while rubbing his hands.
All right.
Jeff was about to go with Matthew to find Lelaine when Francis Florento walked over quickly.
Jeff and Matthew, your grandfather's arrived. He's currently at the Bayview restaurant. He's waiting to see you, Jeff.
Grandpa's here.
Jeff was a little excited. He looked at Matthew and said,
Let's go see Grandpa together.
Matthew smiled and said,
Jeff, you go yourself. It's you that Grandpa really wants to see. Besides, I get to see him all the time.
All right, Lelaine's in room 304. Go meet her.
Jeff replied, then followed Francis toward the Bayview restaurant. An elderly but animated and healthy-looking man sat at the wooden table. He was Virgilio Florento, the patriarch of the Florento family. Behind him stood a man in his 30s, wearing casual clothes. He looked fit, like an athlete. Another man was kneeling in front of Virgilio. It was Kenneth Stokes, the boss of the East Coast division of the family business, who had hosted a banquet for Jeff at the Golden Mansion Hotel. Virgilio looked at Kenneth and thought,
The Kenneth Stokes I know was always chattering merrily, and was admired by everyone. However, this Kenneth Stokes is trembling with fear, with beads of sweat running down his forehead. What on earth is wrong with him?
Kenneth was kneeling on the ground as he said in a panicked voice.
Jeff was injured in the East Coast area. He was almost killed, and I couldn't protect him. I'm ready to accept my punishment.
The security department of the Florento family was managed independently from the rest of the business. Therefore, even though Kenneth was the manager of the East Coast division, he had no control over the security team. He wasn't even aware of the security team's movements. Kenneth had only heard about Jeff's injuries when Jeff was sent to recover on Emerald Island. Many people in the family didn't understand this, and held Kenneth responsible for Jeff's injuries. When he had planned this visit to the island, Virgilio had decided to take the opportunity to see Jeff and resolve the issues with Kenneth. Virgilio reassured Kenneth well.
It doesn't have much to do with you. After all, it's impossible for you to keep an eye on Jeff all the time. However, I can see why the family is upset. The other members of the family might not understand it, even if they do.
Virgilio stopped talking abruptly, suddenly feeling that he had already said too much. As the head of the Florento family, only Virgilio could understand how difficult it was to be in charge of such a large clan. The various forces in the clan were delicately balanced, but when they thought someone had messed up, everything could quickly fall apart. Even though he knew that the incident wasn't Kenneth's fault, he also knew that he would have to act in order to maintain order within the family.
I agree that someone must take responsibility for this incident. I'm sorry, Kenneth, but I have to remove you from your position as the head of the East Coast Division. You no longer work for the Florento family.
Virgilio was very disappointed. He liked and respected Kenneth, but he felt he had no choice. What? Cried out Kenneth when Virgilio announced the punishment. He was dumbfounded. He had never expected the punishment to be this severe. He had worked for the Florento family for 30 years. The family and his work were his whole life.
Sir, Please reconsider. Firing me is worse than killing me.
Kenneth bowed and pleaded crazily.
I'm sorry. It is done.
Virgilio said in disappointment.
Sir, I beg of you.
Kenneth became desperate and moved forward. While kneeling, the man standing behind Virgilio saw this and kicked Kenneth's shoulder. Kenneth screamed and crashed into the wall. The man then retreated behind Virgilio as if he had never moved. Kenneth's body was in pain, but his heart was hurting even more. He knew that there was nothing he could do. He got up with difficulty and nodded to Virgilio, then turned around and prepared to leave. Around this time, Jeff, using his crutches, slowly walked up to the Bayview restaurant. He was surprised to see Kenneth walking out looking inconsolable. When he entered the restaurant, Jeff saw that his grandfather's dour expression and guessed that Kenneth had been punished because of what had happened to him. Jeff walked over to Virgilio and stood in front of him, leaning on his crutches.
Jeff,
Exclaimed Virgilio when he saw him. He had not seen him for 7 years and became emotional. He stood up and wanted to take a good look at his grandson.
Grandpa, please take back Mr. Stokes' punishment.
Jeff kneeled down before Virgilio.
oh,
Virgilio was impressed with Jeff. After not seeing him for 7 years, the first thing he did was to plead for one of his subordinates.
aren't you going to ask what punishment I gave him?
He asked his grandson.
No matter what the penalty is, even if it's only $10, please take it back. It's not Mr. Stokes' fault.
Jeff was determined to defend Kenneth Stokes.